Alright, ladies, gents, and NBs, boys and girls, creatures and creaturettes, beings of this earth and not of this earth, here we are with the vice presidential debate. I'm going to be honest and say that I didn't even know this was happening today, and I'm responding and reacting to this right now. This will be my first watch. Let's see what happens. Let's see how it goes. We'll react and see what happens. Yeah. Let's give it a go. Let's just jump right in, right? I guess. Yeah.
Presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to let that go, but that was weird as hell. Why didn't they just show it too? Like, why didn't? That's all right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started.
I like how they have to disclose that they didn't tell the candidates anything. You know, I mean, that should be obvious, and it probably was obvious already. But and the whole we'll silence the microphones thing. Like this. That's there's out of the four individuals, the presidents and the vice presidents on the Republican and Democratic tickets right now. I don't think, J.D. Vance is a dork and a loser, and Tim Walz is an interesting character, and we'll get into that. I don't think either one of them are meant to be the individual who's supposed to have their mics cut off. But I guess they gotta have it anyways in case there's shenanigans. Let's just jump. Yeah, let's keep on keeping on, and words, and yep, let's go.
Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action.
Okay, it's just like immediately, I gotta point out. First off, the attack did not fail. Iran's retaliation attack onto Israel did not kill any people. It successfully attacked their targets. It went through the dome, and they didn't kill anyone. Iran's attacks were, by all accounts, a success. So immediately, because that's, I got into this in the last video, but there's this perception that, if they convey legitimacy, they are legitimate, right? But all it takes is a little bit of peeling back with the layers, right? I mean, even the frickin' production value is what's going on? It's a little rocky at the start, at least. And they're effectively manufacturing consent around a narrative of what's going on right now, as if the United States doesn't have a direct hand in every single thing that's happening within not just West Asia, as it's properly called, or otherwise known as the Middle East, but also everywhere else around the world. So I mean, yeah, I just really, I don't think Americans and American culture or anything of that nature has any idea how truly isolated our perceptions and our culture and our mindsets are from the rest of the world, and that they don't think of the world the way that we do, which is very Israel-like, hence, also proving its close connection with the United States. I guess we'll see more what else she's going to say, right?
President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final...
The first question of the vice presidential debate is about making up nonsense about how Iran is trying to make a nuclear weapon. That's the first question that they ask. What the hell is going on in mainstream media? Like I put my foot in the door to see what's going on, and then I peek and I think I know what's going on, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's just, Iran, right? Bunch of Nazis, am I right? Like what happened? Like, what is this? I mean, Israel has been committing actions that they are legitimately cartoonishly evil. Like it's unbelievable how genuinely evil Israel soldiers, right? Whether they're committing sexual assaults on camera, whether they're committing genocide and ethnic cleansing, just endless destruction and death of children and women and men, and just absolute annihilation everywhere they go and they look and they touch, right? Nothing. Israel has a right to defend itself, allegedly, right? That's what we'll hear. But Iran, right, who again conducted an attack that they warned about, that they gave a heads up about, these kinds of retaliations were not at all unexpected. This was not unprovoked, right? And the targets successfully, they were successful and they didn't kill anybody. So they're just imagine that. They literally intentionally bombed airfields back. That's what they did. They bombed airfields, and they intentionally did it without any murder of any civilians, right? Meanwhile, Israel can't do anything without killing one of its own soldiers. How is that not fundamentally being what's analyzed here? But instead it's this literal making up nonsense about Iran, as if the average American is politically literate enough to know all that stuff, as if they have the time of day to learn about all that stuff. And it's just nonsense. A person hasn't even started talking yet, and we're already having massive problems with just the language we're using and just conveying Iran and their nuclear weapons, right? Let's just go invade. What the hell is going on? And if this is the kind of stuff that we're going to see out of mainstream media, just asking questions, this tells me that the United States is 100% going to engage. If Israel decides to open up a broader, wider conflict in West Asia and the Middle East, right? The United States will 100% get involved. There's no way. If this is the type of rhetoric and information that they're going to be talking about, they're going to be, just spewing nonstop lies about how Iran is this threat, right? And granted, West Asian governments are, I'm not defending West Asian governments. These the Saudis being a propped up nation for the West, right? And it's an illegitimate monarchy, but it's there anyways, right? Antics in UAE or Kuwait, or Qatar, right? Whether it's the Syrian or Lebanese, there's so much going, and Iran is no exception, and nor is Iraq, and Pakistan too. All of these territories and nations have been destabilized intentionally, not just by Western nations, but by primarily the United States, but it's many of them, in order to kind of maintain hegemony and dominance for whatever reasons. It could be resource, cultural, blah 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 blah, and so they can maintain that strength while preventing any West Asian person from stabilizing and developing. they're in their countries, like allowing their own countries to organically develop on their own terms. Like we're constantly interfering with that, which again is, internationally illegal, but we do it anyways because we're the United States, because we are the bad guys, 100%. And it's just insane to me that they're literally trying to be like, yeah, dude, Iran wants to bomb people. Like, this is just, these people need to be scolded. Like none of this should be allowed. None of this should be permitted within the average perception of the average American person or the average person on this planet. And yet it is, because that's how America is conducting itself right now, even though it's very much in its final stages. I don't know. I really do think the United States is like beginning to collapse, and it's dying, and whatever is going to come after that, like whether it's a few nations, like if it's two countries that split up, or if it's like a couple countries, or if like we turn into full-blown fascism, like I don't know what's going to happen, but the facade just keeps withering and withering away. And just one last thing to wrap up, if you didn't believe me already, all I have to say is that anything after 2001, like the United States has failed in, like the Iraq invasion, Afghanistan invasion, antics with Israel, Ukraine, and that's just Taiwan was a fail. Like anything around Taiwan and trying to stop China, either in an economic way or supposedly military. The United States is too weak to do stuff like that, but they did. They failed in Yemen with the Houthis. The Houthis destroyed America. Like they had to pull. They couldn't even they seized a ship, and had it for like a month or two or something like that. And the United States couldn't do anything. They had no way of sufficiently fighting back against insurgents. And a lot of that reason is not just because of like incompetence, right? But a lot of it is because of the price and the value of American arms and ammunition, right? The manufacturing in this nation, especially since Raytheon, BlackRock, right, all these motherfuckers, like they're gonna be developing these things here for the most part, and thus like selling these products here as well, because it's the United States and they're the primary vessel of the military industrial complex, and thus the prices will reflect that institution, right? So we're talking like shells that are like millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, like are only worth a couple thousand to like Houthi rebels or something like that. You see what I'm saying? Like there's a huge financial gap there that even like Israel and Palestinian resistance is like replicating. But like on the broader scale, that's the level of like genuine incompetence we've had, right? Like we're not doing Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam was a failure, right? Korea was a truce, right? Like that arguably failed, right? Afghanistan again in the past, right? Like the only victories are like Grenada, which is like, how does that even count? Like that's just like immoral. You shouldn't be allowed to do that at all. Grenada's like so tiny. And even they'll cite things like the collapse of the Soviet Union, right, quote unquote. But I like to bring this up anytime people bring that up, and it's like, okay, 2 words, Vladimir Putin. Like that's what. Anytime anybody's like the Soviets bad, USSR bad, it's like, okay, you got your liberal democracy. Are you happy? Like, are you happy with? Oh, it's not real liberal. Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting. It's almost like liberal democracy is not the bastion of strength that it appears to be. No, but they'll just blame it on Putin, and then like praise, Islamophobes like Alexei Navalny, who didn't deserve to die or whatever, but he's still a piece of shit. And all of this is just because of the United States antics, and even in the face of its increasing incompetence and impotence as well. Yeah, sorry. Let's just continue. I'll try to not stop that much, but I don't know, man. Like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to stay silent about like people's BS? Like, no, I'm gonna. This is nonsense, and so I'm gonna say it. Let's continue.
Voice in the Situation Room. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is...
Yeah, I mean, so right off the bat, he's kind of basically speaking exactly how she did, but like, I mean, it's his first answer, his first ever debate, so I guess it's not going to be perfect. Excuse me. But it's a little weak, not, it's like all of his like riz just like drained out of his soul, and I don't know if that's because it's, I mean, they're both like, JD Vance is a clown, but they're both just like domestic politicians that aren't operating, against, like, if I'm going to be honest with you, I think that was actually kind of a dumb opening question, because it makes sense within like the cultural narrative that America's trying to manufacture right now. But like the average American like can't pay their bills and they're miserable and they're trying to just get by. And like, are they really? I mean, I guess if they can successfully convince them that Iran is going to be some type of threat, then they'll be able to pivot that and like make them a scapegoat. But having this as like the opening question for vice presidential candidates who are both, I'll just refer to them as like domestic, like internal politicians, right? Like they're not dealing with foreign policy, at least right now. Like to ask them these questions, it's just like weird. It's just, I don't know, man. Like in the past, especially pre-COVID, like there was the show was being run a lot better, like the question there's the flair and questions, and I mean it was a complete dumpster fire, but its ability to convey legitimacy like inherently was way more implicit and way more obvious. Now I don't know, man. It's so obvious. Like there's so many cracks of the veil that America and the government and the corporations are trying to put up, right? The ruling class, right? The cultural narrative that everything's fine, just keep on keeping on, right? And that you're totally just, it's all in your head, right? You just gotta go outside, right? You just got anxiety or depression or something, and like that stuff's true, but all of that cultural nonsense like gets in the way of the actual problems that we have right now. Where the current ideological mindset with either one of these individuals within the mainstream, whatever you want to call it, is not going to be sustainable. And the fact that that's the first question, that's just insane. Like that's insane to me. That's their first question: is Israel and Iran's like right to defend itself? And again, Tim Walz's answers were like copy and paste right out of Kamala Harris. Again, he's got a little less experience, so maybe it'll take a little bit for him to warm up. But I don't know. It's just gross to see like the Democratic Party just like make a conveyor belt of like the people they want to be their talking heads and like then do their bidding and stuff. And ironically, like JD Vance is way more like emblematic or poster boy rather of like it's interesting because Tim Walz is like a person who should like genuinely be in politics. He cares about people. You don't have to agree with all of his opinions. I don't. He's certainly way too much dick riding of Israel, that's for sure. But he cares about normal people. He does. He objectively does. And that is a weakness, because politics is ruthless. It's not, you know, it's ruthless. There's bad actors and JD Vance is an excellent, you know, he this guy was dumping on Trump just 2 years ago, right? Not even, just a little before that. Switches parties if he hadn't already, you know, and now he's obviously becoming Trump's vice presidential pick because Trump is running out of people in his corner and he's got less and less power on Capitol Hill. You know, and he takes dumb advice from his dumb son, his dumb cokehead son too. But, you know, if the Democratic Party, you know, Kamala Harris has way better political instincts, I think, than J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And I think Tim Walz's honesty and authenticity is going to be potentially a weakness. But then again, you know, there was already mention of this when he was added to the ticket, that there's not going to be some kind of understanding that he actually wants to be, you know, in the Oval Office, like in the actual presidential chair. But the problem is, like, if something does happen to Kamala Harris, like, he will be in that. Like, that's the whole point of the position. Because the country is so used to the vice president kind of being like this, not a joke, but like, I mean, it is kind of a joke, right? Like, it's like, what the hell do you even, like, it's like backup president in case they die. Like, that's the role, you know, which is pretty bizarre. So yeah, I just think it's kind of weird that that's the avenue they're taking, that, you know, they're clearly trying to puppet Tim Walz, but it's not, I don't know if it's going to go that well. And JD Vance is like a way more appropriately slimy and gross person for the Democratic Party. But I guess, you know, putting your genitalia on couches is a surefire way to, you know, prevent people taking you seriously more often en masse. So let's see what happens. Let's see what his answer is going to be.
Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, so yeah, immediately two things. One is he's not that strong, you know. He's kind of not running on fumes. Like, he's got, you know, the right idea of how to like portray himself as like not an idiot, which he is. Excuse me again. You know, he's, first of all, the $100 billion frozen asset thing, like, still burping. Excuse me. The $100 billion asset thing, like, I don't even know if I have to, like, you know, clarify that that's nonsense. And strictly from, like, an optics perspective, you know, the idea of, like, he'll, you know, like, he's executing a lot of the optics really well. But I think like since he just has like no charisma at all, which again is yet another difference he has with sorry to move the mic so much, is another difference he has with Tim Walz, who again is, you know, because he is so organic, he's just oozing charisma. He actually cares about working people, and that comes to, you know, that comes to his favor. Whereas JD Vance is like a rat and, you know, slimy, and the Republican Party's hand is so far up his ass that like he'll do and say whatever they want. So you know, I think like, you know, he's gonna go for like he's clearly putting a little bit of oomph to like try and show that like, no, I'm like legit, right? But I just fundamentally feel like it's not gonna add up. Like he's got like the political ambition, but he has none. I mean, he has some instincts, but he has like none of the actual like you know, zest or energy that is really, you know, not just required in Republican. Again, like you know, the Republican and Democratic parties are instruments of chaos. They're you know, bodies of the state and corporations of the United States that are immoral and evil. I'm not analyzing this from just my point of view. I'm trying to analyze this objectively and describe to you this or that, you know, strategy wise, like with Republicans or Democrats, in addition to like my perception, right? Because you know, that's what's being thought. But there's like what we should think and what we are thinking about, right? And those two things are very, very different in this country because the mainstream media, the government, the corporations, Republicans, Democrats, all of the status quo really is reinforcing, you know, Marxists would call it the superstructure, is reinforcing the base, is what we would also call it. But to put it in like normie words, right? It's like all of our culture and ideas and like even the movies and music, right? Like all that ideologically reinforces like capitalism is good, America is good, liberal democracy is good, right? And like that all kind of, it's like a glue almost, or like a loop, if you will, if you want to take that route. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not really like impressed. You know, I think the campaigns have like good advisors and strategists on their docket, and they're able to kind of take their advice well. But I think these individuals that are actually on these tickets are, you know, not remarkable people, if that wasn't obvious already. And even Tim Walz has his limits, as you can see, right? Even from the first question, and showing that at the end of the day, I think both of these people, you can say about this, is that they'll get in line with the party, that they will not, you know, they're not, you know, they're not, their administration, if they were to be president, would not be like a bull in a china shop. They're not going to be tossing things, despite Donald Trump being JD Vance's shared ticket candidate, right? There's just not going to, they don't have like that go against the grain in them. They're just not. I forgot where JD Vance is from. He literally described, like he did, like if he had Riz, right? Like what he, like imagine if President Obama just said all this stuff that like JD Vance, like he would have fucking sold it. Like it would have been so, like, you know, I'm no, you know, every president is a war criminal, but I think President Obama is one of the least terrible ones. Like he's bad, like just he killed innocent people, like in a hospital, with drone strikes. And like, that's just one of the things. Like he's not, I don't support this person. All U.S. presidents have committed like atrocity, like, and we're talking like Abraham Lincoln, we're talking like George Washington, we're talking Thomas Jefferson, right? These people like committed unbelievable, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, JFK, Jimmy Carter, okay, all of these people, right? Like they committed just as much atrocities, like even worse. And these images and these ideas that these people are great are very, very, again, being reinforced, being perpetuated by the status quo, by all this nonsense in America, even though it's not true. And look, I don't want to keep like going on and on because I feel like there's so much to say, but I can't just like speak for 3 hours every time, you know. I'm just, yeah, I've said enough. You know, both of these could be better. All of this could be better right now. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens next.
Senator, Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance,
It's like major sad, like major sad right now, seeing Tim Walz, like, you know, now granted, Trump is, Americans hate Trump for the wrong reasons. Americans should hate Trump because Trump is America doing American things to America. He is a reminder to Americans that we aren't jackass, that we are the bad guys, okay? And everybody wants to act like, Donald Trump is like some kind of anomaly, right? But he is just a manifestation of, like, not just this country's id, but like some of its worst impulses. However, what his greatest sin is in status quo and mainstream media and like normal people and liberals is that he's just like, so he's tweeting and he's just so crazy and mean to U.S. troops, right? Notice traumatic brain injuries, right? Like, the fact that there's like this focus on actually talking about like why to think that like we were focused on peace and stuff. It's like, oh, yep, I guess we're all going to forget about that now and just talk about the next thing and just say a bunch of BS. And, we'll talk about how Iran's got a weapon and there's a bunch of, war stuff going on. And yeah, that's totally like, this is not acceptable. This is not what Americans need to be hearing. This is the first 10 minutes of the debate. It's foreign policy, Iran and Israel. Like, my dudes, like, I can't pay my bills. Like, I can't put food on my table. Like, that's what people are thinking. That's what's going on in their lives. And this is what we're talking about. And so I really think, any person who portrays themselves as allegedly progressive, but who fundamentally wants to stick to the status quo, aka like liberals, for example, or centrists or whatever, they see Donald Trump as some kind of like example of what America isn't about, right? Because they don't have material analysis, because they're idiots, because they're liberals, and they're nowhere better than conservatives, no matter how much either one of them thinks so. There are so many similarities between American conservatism and American liberalism that I would actually call them not real distinct, like as a distinction without a difference. It's just which one of you tolerates gay people slightly more. That's I'm not joking. That's not like a reductionist take either. Like, especially noting the policies that are coming out of this campaign. Both of these presidential campaigns was specifically within 2024, right? Kamala Harris with border security, housing subsidization, small business subsidization, right? And then Donald Trump's like terrorists, right? Bringing back tax reduction, like all of this Republican conservative policy stuff, okay? Just like objectively. Even if Kamala is offering, again, none of this stuff is going to actually happen because it's all just lies and the Democrats are liars and it's all just like nonsense. It's all of it is nonsense, and they will do none of what they say, just so that's absolutely clear. Like nothing they say will happen, and if it does, it'll be in such low breadcrumb levels. You'll be like, oh, it's like I don't even want you to do it anyways now if you're gonna do that. That's what they'll be doing. So I don't actually expect her to implement these price caps at all, but we'll see. And even if she is doing that, again, that is not necessarily an illustration of like leftist economic. I mean, it is like price control is like objectively state-controlled economics for sure. However, and I'll maintain this line, like, I will maintain this line permanently. Like these, America is taking a very authoritarian turn, and that's manifesting in ways in which both of the mainstream political parties are coalescing and becoming similar and similar, but they're advocating for stronger and stronger governments, telling the American people that's for security, order, growth, blah, 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 but it's actually just, developing the world's most fascist empire it has ever seen. It's disturbing what the United States has done and continues to do. And I don't think Americans really understand that, like, everything in America that we have, all of our stuff is artificially, a better way of saying it is that it was unsustainably gained. We didn't get these things, and we aren't continuing to keep these things because the markets are stable, because our resources are stable, because there's like symbiotic relationships and mutual cooperation. Like, no, it's endless exploitation and like child slavery and poverty and pollution. Like, objectively, that's what's happening. And as the contradictions of capitalism become more and more prominent, the state has to intervene more and more so, and you're seeing that directly with these campaigns, whether it's tariffs and tax reductions on the Republican side, whether it's price cap control, border security. President Biden added 200,000 new police officers over the course of his 4 years. They'll pull out of Afghanistan, but that's kind of, I don't know if he did that during. I mean, he had all politicians have bad ratings, but he had bad ratings at the time. I don't know if he did this for that reason or if it was because of Ukraine or Gaza or whatever, but he pulled out of Afghanistan, and even though if it was like the right call, it's not like he's like, oh, we gotta bring peace to that region. Like, no, the Taliban just came right back in, and they're the dominating they're the dominating ideology and group now. So it's not like we are actually interested in executing the things that we saying we want to do abroad and creating those results. Like, the empire is becoming more and more pathetic, despite the fact that the state needs to intervene more and more, which again, I don't actually, I mean, they'll find a way. What they'll do is they'll make the budget more and more altered around the military, and they'll just start spending, because the government has becoming more and more anemic over the years from conservative and neoliberal politics, just like stripping away resources, like not dealing with inflation, letting crash after crash happen, like, and not actually stabilizing the markets if that's what they want, which they shouldn't, but so be it. Now all of your suffering ensues. Congratulations, guys. I hope you're happy. I'm really worried about where the country's going. For like a politics and like history nerd and stuff, like, all of the signs, the amount of similarities between America and Rome's collapse, even if Rome was a lot slower, is very jarring. And the amount of like historically significant events that happen in America all the time, and you can really see that with how much the state is getting involved, how much focus there is on like arms selling, making more arms. I mean, during COVID, we saw the greatest wealth transfer in American history to the 1%, the 1% of the 1%. And they use those resources to start developing cop cities and developing police budgets. And I mean, you've seen these videos. I mean, cops are already insane and unhinged. And now they're becoming even more militaristically equipped, and they have more technology, even though they're even though the material conditions in America are worsening, right? Like, education is getting worse. People's job, like, the quality of our food is getting more and more poisonous because the FDA is not intervening and doing stuff like that it needs to do, right? The misinformation that's spreading about, right? There are all of these like rampant issues that aren't being properly dealt with, which also end up manifesting and affecting the things that the state does choose to implement as its solutions and decisions, like to deal with the problems that are actually happening, because they're not going to actually accept genuine progressive reform in the direction of socialism or communism, which, any person, if you, like, to this day, if you're still kicking and screaming about this, like, do it as much as you want, man. Like, China is running so much by it. Like, China, I just have to say China. And, like, that's alone it's GG. Like, this is, communists don't need to, communist projects are doing enough of the work themselves to show you that, like, it's superior. And you're watching the contradictions of specifically American capitalism, but not just America, right? Look at Brexit in Britain, right? Look at the rise of far-right movements in Europe with France, with the Netherlands, with Nordic countries, with Germany, with Spain, with shit, I mean, that's like not even it. Like that, there's so much more, and that's like all Western countries, right? Like Eastern European countries, like Orban or Gerben. Actually, I don't know if Gerben Guli. Actually, yeah, I don't know if he's, but like Orban specifically, right? It's not like Eastern European, so, and they're members of NATO and EU, if I'm not mistaken. So it's, you know, it's not like Europe is doing super swell either. It's just that they're, you know, they've got a different situation going on where like America's been able to do whatever the hell it wants for so long now that, you know, now that like, you know, the repercussions of like outsourcing our jobs, for example, to China are starting to become more and more fruitful and prevalent and showing, you know, how expensive education's becoming, what we're using for education, all these jobs that don't matter. And then we're also not actually, you know, employing people sufficiently. It's just, it's messy, and it's trying desperately not to appear messy. And that's what the state is for. That is the fundamental that's the fundamental function of the state, is specifically when it's in the hands of the ruling class, specifically the bourgeoisie. It's meant as like this iron fist to keep the working class people down, and so it can maintain its power and hegemony. And while we think things are okay right now, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, I don't hear. I mean, it is. It is. It's genuinely disturbing what they're getting up to, and they're cooking behind the scenes, and nobody's paying attention. I mean, people are paying attention, but it's not enough, and it'll be too late before. But I mean, we're already getting, you know, shootings in subway stations, for example, right? People jumping over the turnstile. People are shooting people because like that. Bringing hostile and hot-headed security to public transportation checks, which then result in the accidents of murders regularly, is like the emblematic sign of like a fascist state that's like not doing well. Like that's like literally a direct symptom. And those types of solutions are becoming more and more prominent with protesters, with whatever, you know, this and that is happening, whether it's like women losing their rights or like Palestinians getting genocided, and like all of these Americans are like, please stop, please stop. And college students saying, please stop, and they won't. The anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian college protesters were even like more peaceful than their Vietnam anti-war predecessors, who had like armed guns and stuff, you know, they were armed and they had weapons, and you know, the American government was less brutal with them than they were with like unarmed, you know, like libs, you know, and like SJWs. Like this isn't, you know, this is bizarre, man. And the Democratic Party is probably like the ultimate lie, right? The Republican Party is like the abusive like partner who's gonna like, you know, beat the living ass out of you, and like you'll be obvious, and they'll tell you you'll hate you, but they'll hate you. But the Democratic Party is like an enabler. They'll be like, you know, I love you, and then beat you, and they'll say I love you and beat you more. And it's like, what is happening? What is this strange, creepy gaslighting going on? And as we see, specifically Tim Walz, who is supposed to be like this like ideal Democrat, right? Like that's what Democrats are all about. Like, you know, we're seeing the first transitions of him into a, you know, not just a presidential politician, but also a wartime politician, which is not going to be, you know, that's not his MO, man. I mean, they both have military backgrounds, but they're not, specifically Tim Walz is not going to be gung-ho about these foreign policy things. And I don't know. This is weird, man. Like we're not even 10 minutes in. I've been talking for almost 13 minutes now in response, just because there's so much nonsense to address, and I can't actually like capture it all. I can't talk about it all. There's so much to convey. There's so much to correct. There's so much nonsense. Like I don't know. I'll have to just like stop here and continue, and we'll just move on to the next point.
The U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before.
So I'll interrupt him now. The first thing I want to say is that Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem in like 2019, if I'm not mistaken, which was easily like one of the most antagonizing like diplomacy. Excuse me. Sorry for all the burping. Just trying to, have sustenance while doing this. He moved the embassy there, and I don't know if it was the Capitol or it was the embassy, yes, which was considered such an antagonistic move that significantly altered the events of, what was going on the next few years. So, because Donald Trump tries to convey himself as, like this pro-Israel candidate, and so is JD Vance trying to convey that as well, but they're not, Trump is going to do what he wants to do, and so will JD Vance, and that applies to everything. And again, this did not start on October 7th, man. It's crazy. It's crazy that they just legitimately pretend and act. I think it's genuinely because they are dumb. You have to have, you'd either have to be genuinely Dr. Evil level evil or something, or awareness, to be the kind of genuinely bloodthirsty person that the presidential position requires, at least within the context of America's empire. We warned Netanyahu, the Egyptian government warned him. We were telling them for months. The Biden administration warned him for months and months. And in addition to that, the Biden administration has been personally sending all these arms deals to Israel. So it doesn't, Biden is more pro-Israel than Trump. Objectively, Biden is one of the Biden is the textbook example of a person who is a super Zionist but doesn't need to be a Zionist at all. A very white Catholic Democrat. I support abortion, but let's put the black people on the back of the bus or whatever. He supported the crime bill. He was against the busing bill. And other stuff these, this is so weird. It's all just lies and nonsense. There's so much nonsense. This is so much nonsense. This did not start on October 7th at all. I'm just going to continue, man. Let's just keep going.
Before, ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you.
I don't think that's an accurate way of describing that, but okay. All right, but again, just emblematic of the talking points they have, It's not about genuine points. It's just gotchas and all right.
Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof.
Yeah, bro, we all saw it. Yeah. It's sad. It's terrible, but we all saw it. This is going to be a little bit of a cynical point, but like if Americans don't deal with climate change and then like climate change comes and like screws them up, like if a drunk driver is like driving and then they get in an accident and die, like is I mean, I guess it is sad. It's sad, right? Like we're choosing, I guess like the idea is we're trying to be like better, right? And like care that that's bad, right? Because like I thought like comeuppance was like a thing that we valued, but I guess not. Like it's just, you legitimately, like even if you make bad decisions, people should just like enable that and be okay. Like we've been contributing so much damage to the climate and this planet like for decades, if not centuries. We have been so negligent of our own internal issues, and then like when tragedies affect Americans who again are largely innocent, like very true. I'm still standing by the argument that like this is bad. People shouldn't have to deal with this. This is terrible. It's unnecessary death. How is this their fault, right? However, that's an incomplete assessment of the situation, isn't it, right? Because there's a part of this where Americans could have prevented these things from happening if we were more proactive on so many different ways. These kinds of disasters are affecting places all around the world. North Korea had terrible floods just a couple months ago. And that was a propaganda outlet effort that, where the United States could have offered help to North Korea, like the children, like who are like dealing with the aftermath of that. No, it's time for more sanctions and more propaganda, to send against them. And then when it happens in America, it's like, oh my God, how it's like, same thing. The same rhetoric happens with mass shootings. It's like, how could this happen here? It's not supposed to happen here. It's this mindset that Americans are separate from the rest of the world and that our actions don't have consequences. And then when things like more and more natural disasters happening, when more and more mass shootings and like weird school shooters and serial killers, when fundamentalist groups fly planes into our buildings, like you guys give Pikachu face, and it's like all of the answers are right there in front of you. We are the bullies of the world, and all of these types of like boomerang effects that come back to bite us in the ass. Like now Americans are dying in floods, right? Like, are you guys happy? Like, are you happy with this? Are you like, these things could have been prevented if we had taken our problems more seriously when they happen. But we don't, for a myriad of all kinds of reasons. But we don't, and that's a tragedy. Yeah, man. I mean, we all saw this picture, dude. So he's such a slimy person. He's such a fucking slime ball. It's so gross.
Collapsed, and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again,
See, I'm going to take this opportunity to nitpick, right? Okay, because he just said the government's supposed to do what it's supposed to do, but Americans are like big government bad. The government shouldn't be doing this and this. Democrats even convey the logic that the government shouldn't be involved with like women's decisions, and like they have the right idea about that. But and I said this in the Kamala and Trump debate video, like. The whole issue with abortion is that the state should be intervening, that the state should be supplying resources, Planned Parenthood, protections, education, specifically along the lines of religious education, since there's so much anti-abortion sentiment from communities like in Christianity. Like actual, if Christians saw how much like new life is brought into the world, how much healthy family building is occurring because of Planned Parenthood, they would probably significantly change their mind on issues like abortion that wouldn't require the Supreme Court to take away the rights of women and then subject women to endless deaths, for Republicans to then pretend to care because they're not getting laid as much, and then they're like, oh my God, nobody wants to fuck me when I take away women's rights. So then they started to pretend to care, and now I think it's unironically at least a soft majority of Republicans are now in favor of abortion. And we didn't even have it legal for like 50 or something like that years. It wasn't even that long. I still can't believe that. Like they literally took it away. Like that's insane. I still can't believe that happened. I still can't believe that happened. Oh my God. Jesus Christ. So when JD Vance talks about, like in this moment, right, or any moment, when they talk about the government needs to do its job, it's like Americans can't be advocating for small government and like not, this has nothing to do with taxes. Like our taxes are being largely absorbed for war and death abroad, endless destruction and hundreds of billions of dollars of arms packages to nations we have no relation or true connection to whatsoever, while all of our issues continue to fester in this country. Our taxes need to be reduced across the board. Not if you're, a billionaire, right? Or like multimillionaires, right? But like I would say people that make like $5 million or less, like every single person in that bracket should have lower taxes, like just objectively speaking. Maybe like 5 million to like, you start working your way down to the hundreds of thousands and it's like, a slight reduction. And then like you get to like 200,000, 300,000, it's like a larger reduction, but still small, right? Because, it's, I think that's like a good way of like throwing a bone to the petite bourgeoisie, right? It's like making small, like you literally just appeal to them, like nothing will change. And if anything, you'll get a small reduction in taxes, right? Because at the end of the day, these labor aristocratic losers just want that. And if we want to avoid having to do things like the Chinese and Russian solutions, historically speaking, to that kind of issue, to put it lightly, that we'll need to do things like that. And that will require the intervention of the state, the government, which we keep draining of resources and we keep making our education worse, and we keep demanding, like we're wondering why the roads are so trash, why our commodities are so garbage, why infrastructure is crumbling. And it's like, you guys actively advocated for smaller government for decades. Like, what are you fucking talking about? Where is this like, no, I can't subscribe to the idea that Americans aren't partially at fault for this. Like, we have decided to put ourselves in this pit, in this corner, and it's our responsibility to get ourselves out. And then when things go bad, we kick and scream and throw a tantrum and act like it's not comeuppance. And it's just insane in like one small way, just a small tiny way, right? Just a small little phrase and like a nonsense answer that's happening in the moment is so indicative, is so revealing about what to really think about what's going on. And that's not going to happen from these people. Let's continue.
And the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about.
Don't do it, dude. Don't do it. Don't do it. Is he going to deny climate change? Is he going to do it?
Is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world.
We are easily the most polluting, damaging environmental entity on the planet. Easily. Nothing could possibly be farther from the truth from that. That is as strong of a lie as a lie comes. There is no single greater threat to the planet's health than the United States of America and capitalism. And this pivot to not address climate change, which might just be like an awareness of Republican voters being, losers and conspiratorial, like hoax and generators who don't want to acknowledge reality. Like, why would people respect you if that's what you guys are going to do? Okay, so don't throw a fit when people are like, nobody takes you seriously. You're choosing to be a dumbass. And when you guys deny things like climate change and then nobody takes you seriously, that's not on us. Suck my fucking dick. Grow up. You pretend to be adults. Like, grow up and change. Like, that's not my problem. None of us care anymore. Liberals, centrists, and like all of us. You guys are alone. You're in your little corner and you're like, the climate, it's not the scientists. So what? No, man. Everyone else is on board and it's just you guys. So if that's what you guys want to do, be my guest. But like your constituency is shrinking even more. I've been seeing places around where I live that I would normally assume would have had Trump things out by now, but I'm seeing Kamala Harris and Walz campaign like pictures and picket things or whatever the hell, I forget what they're called. Like, you stab them into the ground, they're like little signs or whatever. And And a lot of that's because the Democratic Party is appealing more and more to Republicans and centrists as it becomes more and more authoritarian and more identical to conservatives. But to be, man, yeah, you guys are alone if you still want to deny it. So good luck with that. Everyone else is moving on, and we will leave you behind. So continue with that. This weird pivot with bringing back manufacturing. You can obviously see that they're trying to avoid answering the question with climate change with that because Republicans are liars about it, even though it's very, very real. And he's going to put it in the context of like bringing back jobs because our manufacturing jobs were shipped abroad because of conservatives and liberals, in the 90s and going forward. Excuse me. And so that's why he's conveying that rhetoric. But again, he's not going to do. I mean, these Republicans, they don't do anything. They're slimeless. Everything's going to continue to get worse, definitely, if they win. Which might accelerate the conditions for revolution, but I don't know if that's like the proper way of doing that. So discussion for another day. But we are the single greatest like damaging entity on the planet. But I think, as long as American politicians can like convey legitimacy and stability, kind of like how a child goes to a parent looking for like reason, because Americans are so existentially, spiritually lost on a fundamental level, and it's so obvious politically speaking that they, it's taken me over a decade for sure of just like learning to get anywhere close to what I would call like confident about my own opinions and like believing in my own like, views and stuff like that confidently. It's unbelievably excruciating how much labor it requires to truly be involved in like this productively and correctly, which makes me sympathize with the average person, but it doesn't make me sympathize with people like this who are supposed to be on top of things like this, and they aren't. They're lying. It's just gross. It's just gross nonsense. Climate, a green economy and a green transition is potential for the greatest economic prosperity the United States has ever seen. Implementing specifically with state control, like education, job transition reforms, reduction. You could like if you had a soul, you would return lands to indigenous Americans and give their right of return and return their sovereignty, and disassemble the reservation system, and then give back like pipeline lands and stuff, like return all that, reduce fracking, right? And then you just begin a massive green energy campaign, nuclear power plants, windmills, dams, solar panels, right? You set them up all around. You start building that type of shift in economic functioning and, economic job opportunities, like all of that, just having, not only would that be good economically speaking, but we're not even addressing like how much that would help the environment and our mental health and our community. Like we won't even deal with that for a second. The actual economic value that type of turn would have could single-handedly get us out of this like economic issue we're having right now. We could unironically bring back jobs to America, start using our own raw materials and start trading more fairly with other nations, start developing our goods, blah, 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 and then doing it with a green economy, as our fuel, as our energy, cleaner air, we start bringing back, that type of change not only has the economic background it has to help people sleep at night, knowing that like when they get up the next day that there's going to be stability and a job and like, economic security for them, right? But then when you actually go out and live in the world with this type of policy implementation, you actually see the positive, like real benefits that this has to the average person, like how much better you feel and how much like just seeing more green in your cities and see people more out and energized and active, right? All of these type of things don't exist because corporations are taking up so much money and the state is becoming more and more anemic, more and more, it has less and less resources. And so where we could make these changes, we aren't at all. And that's, this like climate change is like a human extinction event, but it is also could have been a huge opportunity for like transitioning to the next chapter of civilization, transitioning into like a much healthier, situation in general. But the fossil fuel industry, specifically in the 2000s and 2010s, conducted such a damaging anti-climate change campaign like a propaganda campaign throughout the country and even other places. So, to the point where its damage is like at some point, those companies are like going to have to default or go bankrupt because these are finite resources and the world is transitioning out of this method. Like, it's going to become more and more expensive. It's going to become there's going to be less and less oil fields. There'll be like, it's an unsustainable industry. Fact. Period. End of discussion. And yet we are so hell-bent on maintaining it because we don't want to change. We're just like, we need more fracking jobs. Like, it's such a reactionary take to the point where even the Democratic Party is willing to take it if it'll get them voters. Like that's going to be the successful strategy for any of this. Again, like, I've been talking for a little over 7 minutes now, and it was just to start with the fact of like, that's like this one little thing isn't true. And we need a revolution in this country, and anything short of that is unacceptable. Period. End of discussion. I'm gonna continue before, because like so much of his rambling, because it's like explanation and explanation, and then I realize I have to explain more and more, and then like it's like reaching a limit. I don't know how to succinctly inform like all of this stuff. It's just too much. So I totally understand the average person's place, but it's a lot more common sense than it seems. If you thinking to yourself like climate change is like happening and like insects are dying and like why aren't we changing? Like, you're correct to be like, why aren't we making, like, why does the government let children die in schools all the time? Why is it slaughtering Palestinians in Gaza? Right? Like, these questions, your curiosity is completely valid and warranted in the exact type of critical thinking that we need right now. So don't let any like elitist tell you that like you can't figure it. Like, if you come to some politically autistic person like myself and just have open questions, like we'll give you everything and we'll do our best to like be nuanced and stuff to like but in my experience, like, all it takes is like an open mind to like really just be there. You don't need to be intelligent to become intelligent. That's not how that works. You just have to start asking questions, and then the rest will kind of like show its way for you. And one of the greatest things that America has right now is its rampant stupidity, and that can be obviously seen with J.D. Vance spouting nonsense that millions of people in this country will believe, to all the types of things that we've been seeing so far. Let's see what he's about to say. Let's see what he's gonna finish with here.
What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it's his attempt of like avoiding the question, but it's also saying nonsense. And Kamala Harris is a promise for fracking expansion on her campaign. So I mean, let's see what Governor Walz is about to say, because he might have some decent enough response to this. But just typical. Like, it's even on JD's face, like, of this such a weird not. There's like a soullessness to him, and it's like, dude, like, are you good, man? Like, what's this like gaze and like grimace he's got going on? What the hell is happening? Okay, let's continue.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax, and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest.
I just want to say something really quickly. It's that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have both whether their campaigns are doing this or they're doing this, it doesn't really matter. They've both been using like true things that Trump has been saying and doing. Like it's true. Like they've been saying that America's heart back is like indicative of, it's a strong way to tackle this argument, and I think they're doing a good job by using it in a truthful way. It's not dishonest, like even in the slightest. I mean, especially when he does it, but it might be with Kamala Harris. But excuse me, that kind of like, this is what your president was saying when that was going on. Like that's an effective way of conveying to Americans, like an appeal to them about the ridiculousness of Trump, because Trump is ridiculous and he's a clown. But again, he is not uniquely ridiculous. He is America doing America to America. That's why Americans hate it so much. And the rest of the world is like, wow, Trump is, that's what the rest of the world thinks, guys. That's what they think. It's like they see Trump as like perfect they still think he's terrible and awful and stuff, but like it's very, he's a very American person, very emblematic of America's culture. Very, people associate America and him, with one another for reasons that are like unfortunately appropriate. And I don't know, he's just a complete mongrel. So I mean, it's good to see them that they're truly like attacking Donald Trump. And I do enjoy, at least like on a common decent, I mean, this might be my Midwestern bias, but the fact that they're like just, attempting to agree and like be nice and stuff, that's slightly refreshing. But at the end of the day, it's still optics and doesn't, isn't really, isn't really, it's not enough. It's just optics, and that's all a show. It's all theater. Even if Tim Walz is very, very good, and he's kind of, he's starting to kind of activate his polls is starting to activate. He's starting to answer these questions and rebuttals more successfully, and I have a lot more faith in his ability to handle this stuff going forward. But he's right. Like he said, it's a hoax. He did joke about making more property to invest in. That's objectively true. And so I don't know what the plan is, because I don't know what the deal is with Republicans. They're reaching reaching a point where their climate change denial, which was always unsustainable, is becoming like critically unsustainable. And like if they'll have to do a 180, or they'll like copium their way and they'll be like, let's transition our jobs back home via green energy, or they'll like gaslight into pretending that they were on board the whole time, or whatever BS it is. Yeah, it's just what they do. Let's see what he's about to finish with, shall we?